If you're an HR professional who works hard to fill roles within your company, keep employees engaged, and build company culture, welcome to America Back to Work, where dreams only work if we do. We'll share wide-ranging issues surrounding pre-employment background screening, HR topics such as recruiting, hiring, labor trends, and company culture, as well as broader HR-influenced business topics such as customer experience, service level excellence, and protecting what matters through best practices in prevention, protection, and corporate security. America Back to Work is brought to you by S2 Verify. Here's your host, Arnette Heintze.
Welcome to America Back to Work, brought to you by S2 Verify, where our purpose is to help you hire with confidence and manage insider risk. I'm your host, Arnette Heintze. Thank you for joining. Today, our guest is Tina Grimes. Tina is an international speaker, leadership training expert, and the CEO of Tina Enterprises, the company she founded to take employee training to a higher level. For more than 25 years, Tina has delivered informative and engaging training to thousands across the United States, Paraguay, Ethiopia, just to name a few countries. Tina, I'm so glad you could join us today. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about your career and work and what led to the establishment of Tina Enterprises?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm happy to spend this time with you today. For 30 years, and I can't believe it's been 30 years that I have been speaking, coaching, and training. And I know you're probably saying I started when I was 5 years old, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it has been 30 years. And for me, I had a passion very early on in life around leadership. I played sports. I was involved in internships and a lot of things that really set me up. And I didn't know it then, but I was rising to these leadership levels, but I always wanted to turn around and teach someone else something or bring someone else along the journey. So I was very fortunate and blessed at 23 years old to really identify that my purpose was to help individuals and organizations get from where they are to where they want to go. Hence, turning intent into action. So that's my passion. That's what my work revolves around. And I get an opportunity every day to help individuals and organizations around the world move in leadership and communications and DEI in a way that it helps them to turn that intention that they have around the work into really taking action and being very productive.
Well, that's great. So, and I love it when I hear entrepreneurs that identify a purpose and they put all of their passion into delivering that purpose. So that's wonderful. If I were to ask you, can you frame up a typical client you might have when it comes to leadership development? What you see most often in this area?
Yeah. So I consider myself and my clients have named me a leader's leader and a coach's coach. So my clients range from large corporations, Fortune 500, large organizations, all the way to smaller nonprofit organizations. The common theme or thread is that my clients tend to be organizations that really are serious about taking that next level step around culture and establishing a culture of leadership or a culture of communication. So my clients look different, in terms of sizes of organizations, but the commonality among all of them is that they all are looking for me to come in and really help them to do a better job with developing their leaders and enhancing their organizational culture around leadership and communication. That also includes one-on-one executive coaching and training for individuals within those organizations or individuals that are not in organizations that I'm serving, but they also want to enhance and improve their leadership skills. So what I love about what I get to do is I'm that safe space for leaders, for high-level leaders, for executive leaders, for those who haven't yet become extremely vulnerable with the people that they lead. So what I see in organizations across the board is just this continual opportunity for growth around leadership and communication.
So you mentioned a great area there that I'd like to drill in a little bit on, and that's with looking at company culture. And so you're trying to diagnose problems that might be in a in a company. What are some of the indicators that the problem may actually be the leadership issues? Can you highlight some of those points?
Yeah, and I would say that's tough for leaders to receive sometimes. But when there are leaders that are very open to really allowing me to come in and help them advance their organizations, they're more receptive to hearing some of these things. And some of these things include when there is high turnover within organizations. That could very well be an indicator that the issue is in the leadership. When there's low morale within organizations, that's a very high indicator that the issue may be within leadership. Also, when everybody's buzzing and the culture becomes this gossipy kind of culture, where everybody's talking about the leader, but they're not talking to the leader, you tend to see those things happening. And that is oftentimes a red flag. That's oftentimes an indicator that the problem isn't necessarily with all of the employees, but that we really need to look at leadership. Because not very often do you have the majority of an organization, the buzz is going around and people are saying the same things, and that's not an issue at the leadership level. What I will say, though, is that what I found is that it's easier to come in and help to solve some of these issues when there has been a culture in the organization of trust, or of communication and things like that. And I have found that oftentimes, because those things aren't necessarily in place, that is why people are not feeling as comfortable going to their leaders, or they're not as transparent about what the problems or the issues are. So that's where it's very beneficial for someone like me to come in as an outside voice to try to help that organization.
So that kind of summarizes the big issues that you potentially see in companies that are struggling. Can you identify specific behaviors of leaders that lead to some of these issues around culture, around, the mood in the company, around, high turnover rates? What are the behaviors that really demonstrate, hey, we've got some bad leaders here, that these leaders are doing this? What are some of those behaviors?
Yeah, some of the behaviors that I've seen include, a big one that I see is micromanaging. There are so many people who want to be able to express their creativity in roles, or they were hired in and they believe that, hey, I was hired because I have these particular skill sets, but I'm not able to utilize them, or I'm not able to be as creative in my role because I'm being so heavily micromanaged. So that's a big one that I see a lot, that leaders are micromanaging. And I find when I get underneath that, and we can talk about that a little bit, but there are often reasons why leaders may be micromanaging. They may have turned over big responsibilities to people in the past and they have not carried out or executed in the way that they could have, and things like that. But I see micromanaging as a really big issue. In addition to that, I have also seen situations where leaders have not, they just may not have the right people in seat. So they have organizations where they hired people. Sometimes they hired people to fill roles because those roles needed to be filled at that time. But in this time or in this season, the right people aren't in the right seat. And so what I see leaders doing is trying to force someone to be able to operate or execute in a particular area that really is not the area that they should be operating in. I also see sometimes that with leadership comes an awesome level of responsibility. So I see leaders often not accepting the blame or not taking ownership of failures or situations, that could very well be like the leader's issue, or the thing may not have worked out. So I see leaders not necessarily always taking ownership in what's happening. And that becomes extremely frustrating to the people that they're leading. It doesn't lead for lend itself to be a very healthy culture when that actually takes place. So those are some of the things that I've seen play out. I've seen leaders not necessarily be honest and direct and give good feedback to team members. And team members are operating in a way that they haven't level set on expectations. So the leader may be visionary, but the leader may not have done a very good job of articulating that vision and translating that vision to others in the organization.
Yeah. So I think on those were four great areas that you highlighted. And I really believe those probably are issues that you can help fix. But are there problems, generated by leaders that can't be fixed? Have you seen any issues like that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So I have to say that I am really optimistic and I'm really a big problem solver. So we just go deep and deeper and deeper and deeper, oftentimes to try to identify where those fixes can be. But what I found is that a lot of times a Band-Aid can be put over something more than the actual fix. Because when there is really those four things that I just named, if those are things that are really happening and the leader is not open to becoming a better leader, if the leader is not open to the feedback, if the leader is not open to coaching, to be helped in those areas, there are times, honestly, where I have said there's not a whole lot more that I can do within this organization, because it really starts at the leadership. And what I have found is that I can work with and enhance the leadership skills of everyone else in the organization, and things can be operating, and people can be getting along, and people can be productive and things like that. But I found that at the end of the day, sometimes you just can't change or really can't get that senior leader to have a behavioral change. Now, what does that look like and how does that play out? Like I said, it's usually what I call like the Band-Aid effect. Like things are still moving and operating, but people aren't necessarily happy in their roles, and people are just getting along to go along. And that is not the ideal situation when you're talking about trying to have a better culture of leadership and communication within an organization.
So, Tina, what's your recommendation to our HR professionals out there that can help them understand whether a leader would or wouldn't be receptive to leadership training?
Yeah, so I believe that. This is one thing that I do that's very helpful. I assess individuals and organizations when I go in to do leadership training, and I also provide the same assessment or have the leader take the same types of assessments. What I've found is that becomes kind of it becomes a talking point, or it becomes a tool that really disarms individuals from being offensive, or for being offended or feeling like they're offended or they're being attacked, because it's an interesting way to see who they are and how they're wired. And I found that people really like to talk about that, and it's a very enjoyable kind of discussion. So when it comes to leaders, what I'd usually recommend is finding a way for example, utilizing some type of assessment where that leader can answer questions about himself or herself. And then it's like the feedback is not coming from an individual per se. The feedback is the tool that's actually being used. And then I use my assessment to then talk to the leader about, and I always start with their areas of strength and the things that they're shining in, right? And so we talk about those. And then it makes it a little bit easier to go in and start to talk about those areas of growth. Now, at that point is where I can get a better indicator of how open that leader is to change, how open that leader is to training and things like that, because we kind of have a baseline, or we have something to begin those discussions. And I can start to see, is this person growth-minded? Is this person open to improving in some areas? So I really encourage HR professionals to look at something like that.
Yep. So if an HR professional is trying to initiate a dialogue with a problematic leader, somebody they already know is creating chaos in the organization, and there happens to be senior to the HR team. Am I correct in assuming that you're suggesting that these tools, these assessment tools, are an option of what the HR pros can bring with them in that discussion?
Yes, absolutely. I have found that to work very well. I would work with, so I'll tell you how that plays out. Like there are times when maybe the CEO may not have been the person that invited me in initially to do the training. It may have been someone, the COO, or someone else in a C-suite role. And once I start to talk to that person, and I always do what I call have a discovery conversation. And that discovery conversation may be with multiple people within the organization. A lot of times I begin to hear, even in those exploratory discussions, things that let me know that the problem is at a higher leadership level, or the problem is with the leader. And so that is where I would then go in and recommend, that there's the assessment that's taken. And I recommend it for not just the senior leader, but for others, so that the senior leader doesn't feel targeted. And so that everyone's getting the same type of results. And it can lead, it can be a tool that they're using in their one-on-one conversations. But what I always do is, after I do the assessment, I bring everyone together and I have a workshop around like debriefing the assessment. And that gives an opportunity for people to pair up with each other and to talk to people who are wired similarly to them, and things like that. And so it really starts to open that kind of dialogue around growth. And it's something that you can use so that people can then feel like, I'm not being targeted, but this is something that we're all working on together. And I've actually had sessions where the CEO in the middle of the session has said, looks like I'm the problem. And everybody in the room is going, because they've never seen that before. And then I make sure that my response, is not one that's going to be up on the CEO, but I'll say, hey, let's look at that. What is it that you just observed, in your own assessment that would cause you to make that statement? It's things like that then, even to your other question, that lets me know like, oh, wow, the light bulb has gone off. Here's an analogy. Like I say, I have 2 children, and I always say that the same things that I can say to my friends' children and they would listen, I make sure that I get someone else to tell my children the same thing, right? And so it's that similar kind of concept. So I'm coming in, or the HR professional is coming in, and they're saying some things that other people want to say, but don't necessarily know how to say, but they're being that liaison or that conduit, to really get those conversations going.
Yeah, what are some of the rubrics you use when you assess leadership? And what are you specifically looking for?
Yeah, so when I begin to assess leadership, I'm really looking at, a lot of people say that they're great leaders, but when I begin to assess leadership, I'm first of all looking for things that a lot of people may not necessarily think about first. So I am looking for authenticity in a leader. Yeah. I am looking, because that's really huge, and people want to know that they can relate to a leader. People want to know, I'm looking for, is the leader trust, are they trustworthy? What's their integrity? That character stuff is so important. And oftentimes it's not the first thing that people talk about, but it's so important because I find that the fabric of an organization, and I'm talking about culture of an organization, that tone is set by the leader. And so that's so important for me when I'm assessing leadership, because at the end of the day, you can have people that are very productive and all those types of things, but those fundamental characteristics, the character traits and things are not there, then I don't consider that a leader operating as his or her best in leadership. I also, when I am thinking about good leadership, I'm thinking about, in addition to those things, accountability. Is that leader able to take accountability, be accountable for his or her actions. I'm thinking about, does that leader empower other people? Does that leader set other people up to win? Is that leader a communicator? Is that leader a connector, even more so? I think connecting skills are so critical when it comes to great leadership, especially because what I'm finding for years, I have been doing trainings, honestly, for about 25 years. I've always talked about the various generations and, the differences in organizations and things like that. And so even now, leaders need to be able to connect with employees and people on their teams. They're millennials, that may be Gen Xers, that may be baby boomers. Like, you have to be able to understand each one of those groups that I talked about. They have a different need. They communicate differently. There are different things that motivate them, right? So if a leader doesn't understand and isn't able to connect with people and meet them at their level, then that's an area of growth for a leader. So, when I think about leadership, is that leader, how knowledgeable is that leader in terms of like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and there's so many things that leaders have to be on top of. I say that, and this is my own opinion, I say that this is an employee's market that we're in now. That's my own opinion. In real estate, they say a buyer's market or seller's market. I really believe this is an employee's market. So it behooves leaders to really be at the top of their game, because people will leave, people will go, So it's really, really important for leaders to look at these types of things, so that they know how to reward and retain staff, how to recognize people, based upon what motivates them, what it is that. So for some people, it may be calling their name out publicly. For another person, it may be giving them a day off, a day off work, So a leader has to be really in tune to individuals in his or her organization to know how to meet that person right where they are.
That's so true. Tina, thank you so much for all of that beautiful insight. But
Yeah.
I have one final question before we sign off.
Yeah.
And that is, if S2 Verify were to conduct a background check on you, would there be any surprises?
Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, they would probably be surprised to know that the girl in the suit can also, and the heels, which you can't see right now, can also get out on the basketball court and shoot the
There you
hoops.
go. That's fabulous.
And they say, is that the same person that was just doing our executive training out there with a basketball, And so so they probably would be pretty surprised.
That would be a surprise. Yeah.
By my athleticism that I still have to this day. So.
Well, Tina, thank you so much for sharing your insights, and tell our audience how they can keep up with you and where can they find more about what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. So my website is tinaenterprises.com. So if any of the things that I said spark their attention and they want to see more about some of the work, there's a snapshot. I've been doing this 30 years, so I don't have everything that I could possibly put everything there, but you can get a very good picture of my work on the website. Again, that's tinaenterprises.com. My handle on social media platforms is @TinaWillSpeak. So that's on Instagram, Twitter, @TinaWillSpeak. And on LinkedIn, I'm under my name, Tina E. Grimes. And so that's pretty much where people can find me.
Oh, that's fantastic. So before we sign off here, I'd like to have a minute with my partners, Bill and Jim at S2 Verify. Jim mentioned a topic that I think our audience could benefit from, and it relates to the timing of when backgrounds should start. So it's around a conditional offer. So the employee has to be offered a conditional position subject to the successful completion of a background screening. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right, Arnette. That in the past they would run the background check before they made an offer, but a lot of companies have realized you got to make a conditional offer, and the EOC is really enforce this, you got to make a conditional offer prior to running a background check. And so in the process, with a lot of the ATS applicant tracking systems, they track that and then they'll actually order the background after they make the conditional offer via the applicant tracking system, or they could do it internally.
So what does the employer put themselves at risk for if they don't have that conditional offer extended? If they just, as a routine matter, just start screening individuals before they offer a position?
Well, the first thing you need to do is make sure they have a consent from the applicant. And they got to do that within the hiring process. So they have to make a conditional offer to get them to sign a consent. The litigation, so they're subject to litigation from a lot of these class attorneys if they don't make a conditional offer and then do the background check. And they're subject to the EOC coming in and fining them in addition to the litigation of the attorneys. So
good. So when if you look up and down the compliance ladder, another area that I think our clients and audience would love to hear more about is a 613 letter. So Jim, why don't you share with us a little bit of insight around 613 letters, because I know that's just one of the steps in the process. And the next topic after this should be adverse action letters, I believe. So tell us about 613 letters.
The 613 letter is actually after the statute within the FCRA, but it simply depicts that a consumer has the right to be notified. Careful term here, when public records have been accessed and a record has been discovered as part of an employment process they're engaged in. The 613 has nothing to do with the result of the record, the action that could or could not be taken. It simply is telling a consumer that as part of your background, a public record or records have been accessed as part of the background or assessment for the job or employment for which you've applied. And those letters, by law, go out immediately upon receipt by a CRA of that letter, of that report or that record, so that we receive a criminal record on John Smith, and that there is a criminal record in a certain county, that automatically, within our system, benefiting the employer, dispatches the 613. It's fully automatic. You got a record, it was a public record, the 613 is dispatched. And it's simply nomenclature that describes the act of obtaining a public record as part of an employment process. Billy, anything you want to toss at that?
no, I mean, it's typically the responsibility of the CRA, the Consumer Reporting Agency, to send that out. It is confusing a lot of times to the applicants. They call in here, asking what it is. And it doesn't mean that they're disqualified from a job. It just means that we found a record on them using public access data. So
for our audience, please tune in next week when we continue our exploration of topics critical to success in HR. We'll see you then. And it goes without saying, let's get America back to work, because dreams only work if we do. Tina, thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you.
If you want to stay abreast of HR, recruiting, and hiring trends, tips, and tools, make sure you subscribe to America Back to Work. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a rating and a review.